Welcome into the Irish NFL show. The schedule is out later today, but over this side of the world, we are actively looking forward to the Notre Dame game that this coming August against Navy, the first college game of the season. We're delighted to have Brock Wright, the tight end of the Detroit Lions, join us on the show. Brock, who formerly would have played for Notre Dame, came out of Notre Dame College. It's great to have you on the Irish NFL show.
Happy to be on. Thanks for having me.
Brock, I'd imagine you're aware this game is going on and the great excitement that comes with Notre Dame coming to Ireland and playing this game here in the fall. From your experience there, the importance of globally the game and in terms of the fans obviously recognize that Notre Dame is such a marquee name this side of the world.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Notre Dame's played overseas a number of times in Ireland, and we were actually supposed to play over there in Dublin my senior year. But then we happened to have COVID and we weren't allowed to do any of the travel. So I was really bummed about that, but I'm really looking forward to the game this year. And I know all the guys I played with are going to be tuned in, and we're excited to watch it.
And I suppose in terms of your time at Notre Dame, I mean, we were fortunate. We did 5 guys over, got the opportunity to talk to them. They talked about, the expectations. Because when you're at Notre Dame, it's not just the football side of things. Notre Dame prides itself on the study side of thing, on the character side of thing. Can you talk to us about your experience there, Brock, and what that was like? And do you feel that's kind of made a real difference to you in your life and career?
Yeah, definitely. First, I'll start by saying I think that's the main reason most people who choose to go to Notre Dame, whether it's for athletics or just for academics, that's the main factor. It's a special place. I think Lou Holtz had a quote that said, for those who haven't experienced it, no explanation will suffice, and those who have, no explanation is necessary. And so most people just say that it's special with the kind of tradition they have, the kind of individuals that go there, whether it's students, faculty, staff of the sports teams, or just the people that volunteer as ushers on the campus. It's a real sense of community and backed by faith, and I think that's a pretty special thing.
And can I just, I saw you did a video of a day in the life during your junior year. Does your mom still do your laundry?
No, but she does. She does offer every time she comes up here to Detroit for game days. So, sometimes I'll let her do a load of laundry, but I've had to learn to do it on my own.
Brock, you're playing at the moment for one of the most eccentric coaches in the league, and Dan Campbell, but I suppose just reflecting back again on your college career, is there any particular coaches that I suppose stood out from your time with Notre Dame that you still kind of reflect on as a leading kind of person that helped you transition from the college game into the NFL?
Yeah, definitely. I saw Coach Bayless last weekend, our strength coach, or a few weekends ago for the spring game. And Coach Bayless came to Notre Dame same time I did. We started off spring semester of 2017. And, he's been a huge role model in my life and a lot of the guys I played with there. And he's still with the team. Taught us a lot of mental toughness and qualities that helped us on the field, but more importantly off the field. And so I'm forever grateful for him, and I know a lot of other people are as well.
I suppose a tight end, it's a position where it can be difficult to transition into the league. We've seen it even, superstars like Kyle Pitts, kind of generational talent, obviously incredible player, but even he has kind of found it that it takes a year or two to really find your feet. As somebody who is in the league, Brock, I'm just wondering your thoughts on that, as to, because we've seen in the last couple of years, right, with college, you've seen wide receivers kind of be able to come in. We're even seeing now with cornerbacks, which is a position where, again, it used to take a year or two for guys to find their feet, but all of a sudden you've got Sauce, you've got Patrick Surtain. For the tight end, it still seems to be that it does take that year or two. Can you give us any insights as to why that might be?
If I had to guess, I would say it's probably because of the combination of mental and physical that goes into the position. You have that with every position, of course, but with tight end, you got to do a lot. Be involved in the run blocking, pass protection, running routes, so all facets of the game. And so first, I think it comes with maybe a reason why some rookies might struggle picking it up quickly is because of the mental side of things. But then to do that on top of getting your technique down, which you might not have had necessarily in college or right away when you get to the NFL. So it's a combination of the two of those.
I suppose everybody got an opportunity as firsthand to look at the Lions last year were hard knocks, and going into the season, everybody I wouldn't say they didn't have a lot of expectations, but there was continuous talk this team would make an upward jump, and we saw that, as the season transpired, they nearly make the playoffs. How enjoyable was it last year to be a part of a team initially that was going to have a difficult start to the season, and as the season progressed, got stronger and stronger, and we're so close to making the playoffs?
Right. I'd say it's rewarding, but even more so, it just makes us more optimistic for the future. You get a little bit of that winning mentality, and you just want more of it. My rookie year, we lost a lot of close games, and then to start off last season, we were 6-1, losing close games as well. But then it's almost like we just, we flipped the switch and we started winning some, and now we're just looking forward to keep that rolling into next year.
I suppose piggybacking a little bit on my last question, but from your perspective, did you have a kind of a moment where you realized you had arrived in the NFL? Was it that first touchdown, or was there even a moment before that? I know for some players it can be maybe a big block or something like that. But for you, what was your kind of I've arrived moment?
Oh, I don't know. Well, first of all, my first game was in Los Angeles at the SoFi Stadium, and playing in that stadium was pretty incredible for my first NFL experience. But I don't know. I'd say playing in Green Bay last year, Week 18, Sunday Night Football was a special moment too. Just knowing that I spent every Sunday growing up just looking forward to Sunday night to watch that game, and finally getting to play in it was something really special for me.
Brock, in the most recent draft there last week, Laporta, the tight end, gets drafted. So you have some healthy competition coming in a tight end room. Have you had an opportunity to reach out to him and have a conversation? Because obviously you'll have that experience now, having gone through that in terms of transition from the college game into the NFL, and how you can assist and help these players.
No, haven't met him yet, but he gets here tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to it. And we have a really close tight end unit, so it'll be good to add a couple more guys. And that's the great thing about the position. We're always learning and feeding off of each other. So it'll be nice to have another guy in the room that can help us with that.
Brock, I suppose, look, everybody obviously, the draft is something that gets highlighted, but there are different routes in, and we have seen guys, you went undrafted, signed a free agent. Kurt Warner went that same route. Jason Peters, James Harrison, Chris Harris Jr. from my own Broncos won a Super Bowl. In terms of once you're in the league, obviously media obsess over this guy got drafted in this round and kind of constantly refer to it. In the locker room or with coaches, does that ever even come up?
No, I don't think so. I think people might have an idea of where people were drafted and whatnot, but it's a what have you done for me lately kind of job and league. So all that matters is producing now that you're here. I think that's a pretty cool aspect of the game. Everyone has a different route. Some people it took much longer for success. Some people had it immediately, and that's what makes the game great. It doesn't matter where you came from. It's the ultimate team sport, and you just got to produce.
Brock, you touched on, I suppose, the earlier start to the season and the previous season where you lost games, close games, but there's been a lot of down years for the Lions team, the organization, and the fans. Yet things are turning around. I think it's the first time in many a year that they've been favourites to win the division this season for the upcoming season. Has the expectations sunk in yet with the team? I know it's fairly early in the off season, but it's kind of all of a sudden people are kind of focused on the Lions more so than they would have previously in other years.
Yeah, I think so, but it's just our goal is the same as always. We're just trying to compete, produce, improve, and get wins on the board. But it is notable the fan base, the kind of confidence they have in us now, and there's been this outpouring of support from the Detroit community, and that's been really cool to be a part of. The fan base here is incredible, and having their support means the world to us. So we're looking forward to playing for them this season.
Brock, you're a Texas boy, but obviously having gone to Notre Dame and now in Detroit, the weather's a little bit different. Have you managed to get used to winters, or is that something that will forever be a little bit strange?
I think I've acclimated pretty well, but it's still strange. I mean, we had snow here 2 weeks ago. So in May it was snowing, and which was crazy. I had to go out there and scrape off my window. But no, I don't know if you can ever get fully used to it. But I've done about as good as I think I can.
Brock, there's a story behind the exotic ranch that's held by the family. Do you want to lean into that and tell us a little bit more to the Lions fans this side of the world?
Yeah, sure. My parents bought a ranch a few years back in Iola, Texas. It's not far from where we live in Cypress, and it's a high fenced exotic ranch. So they have about 9-10 different species out there of all sorts of exotic animals, but then regular white-tailed deer and whatnot that are native to Texas. But it's a great place to go out with the family and spend time and kind of just get away from things. And we have some zebras out there that everyone always wants to hear about. So that was kind of the word going around a couple of years ago whenever people found out that we own some zebras.
And having not been, having had the trip to Ireland, I suppose, cancelled because of COVID, and I know that you are an avid golfer. Might we see you on this little green island at some point in the future?
It's on the bucket list. I'm going to get over there as soon as I can, definitely.
Just a quick question around the division, because it's evolving with the Aaron Rodgers trade, and the Packers obviously moving on to Love now. And we saw last week aggressive moves by the Vikings to try firm up this offense. You got the Bears emerging now again, have been so active in free agency. And it's such an opportunity for the Lions. But as a whole, how do you see the division now? It's certainly different to how it would have been since you came into the league.
Right. Yeah. Very competitive division. I'm just looking forward to playing all those teams this year. I think it's going to be exciting to watch it. I know we're ready for it. Any
particular game on the schedule that you're keeping an eye out for?
Oh, no, none in particular. Just, whichever one comes next.
You mentioned, Brock, that, growing up, it was that Sunday night game that you always are keeping an eye out for. Just wondering, when you were growing up, who were the players that you particularly enjoyed watching? And we all have our own, whether they were on the defense or offensive side of the ball. Wondering for you, who was that?
I knew that I was going to play tight end ever since I was in grade school. So I've always been a Rob Gronkowski fan. So I would love watching Gronk out on the field, making plays. And so I would say he's the first one that always comes to mind for sure. And I remember watching him in Sunday night games, making big plays, catching balls from Tom Brady. So that'll always be ingrained in my mind forever.
Brock, you touched on close games. One particular close game last year, which is that Jets game on the road, in which you scored a 51-yard touchdown. Colin calls out to kind of come to Jesus moment. You recognize you've arrived, but to win the game in the manner in which you did with that touchdown so late in the game, that must have been such a fantastic feeling. Can you recall the moments of that play and how it transpired?
Yeah, it was thrilling. I'd say it's it's almost ironic. I honestly didn't have a great game, and I had dropped the ball a few plays earlier. And we had that fourth down and was just able to almost redeem myself in a way and make up for it. And it was pretty special celebrating with the guys after that one.
Brock, we know that even at this time of the year, you have a whole bunch of commitments. So we appreciate the time that you have given to us. We want to wish you and the Lions all the best for the upcoming season. And fingers crossed, you will be competing for the division and playing in the playoffs. And definitely there is an open invitation to visit Dublin at some point in the future.
I'll be out there, no doubt. Thank you all for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Welcome into the Irish NFL show as we continue our look at all 32 teams across the NFL during the offseason. We've finally made it to the championship round, I guess, and we found it. We've finally arrived at the San Francisco 49ers, which is a story in itself. And to tell that story, we're delighted to have John Chapman on from the 49ers Rush podcast. John, you're very welcome to the Irish NFL show.
Man, I'm pumped to be here. I'm not going to lie, little disappointed today. I had my fingers so crossed for the 49ers landing one of those international games, and I was so pumped to, get across the pond. It didn't come to fruition, but that's okay. We were in Mexico last year, but man, the 49ers had a great year last year, and I'm pumped to be here with you, Brian, just to kind of talk about how things are and where things are going to go, because there's a little bit of I don't want to say turmoil, but some discrepancy on who's going to actually be leading this team in the following year.
Oh, John, we're going to get into that in a minute. But look, I won't lie, this was a bit of a strategic move because I did genuinely think that the 49ers were going to be announced as one of the teams traveling over. It looked for a long time, reading the speculation, it was going to be the 49ers against the Jags. The 49ers signed the UK marketing agreement last year. A lot of back and forth in terms of fans thinking this it was inevitable they'd be over. Maybe it'll come to fruition or next season, but look, the international games were announced today. It just shows globally how big the sport is. 3 games in London, 2 in Germany. Obviously, Mexico have got their own situation with the stadium being rebuilt, but I imagine that will come around again. And I believe the 49ers time will come around again. I will ask you off the bat, like, obviously covering the 49ers, but you're obviously a big fan of the game in general, never mind the 49ers. Like, are you taken back by how big the game has become, not just in the States, but around the world?
It's incredible because a lot of like the people that are so diehard football fans, NFL, college, whatever, it's because they started playing at a young age. And so you don't have that overseas. I was lucky enough to go with the 49ers last year to Mexico City, and it was just one of the best football experiences I've had. I've been to Super Bowls. It was just beautiful because you have this, usually whenever you go to a football game in the States, there's 2 teams, and the fan bases, it's 2 teams. But in Mexico City, and you've seen this in a lot of the international games as well in Germany and the UK, you see all 32 teams represented, and it's a much more collective type atmosphere. It's not so much us versus them, this rivalry, so to speak. It's collective, and it's beautiful. And man, I am one of the people that is just diehard more international games. I know season ticket holders don't usually like it because they could lose a home game, but I think it's better for the sport. It's better for the community. And the more people that are exposed to this sport, it just seems like people are just coming in droves.
I think the NFL have made a very clever move in the sense that now the team who give up the home game are the team who have 9 games that season at home, as opposed to the normal 8 since they've moved to the 17-game season. Look, I'm a Giants fan. My story is I'm going back a long time, 1986. I fell in love with NFL. My first ever Super Bowl to watch was the Giants beating the Broncos in Pasadena. But my mom and family in the States on the West Coast, near enough to San Francisco, Los Gatos. It's near enough Sacramento. So I used to be out there for holidays. I've been to the old Candlestick Park back in the day. So yeah, my story goes back a long time. But interesting enough with the international games, I've been there as a fan, and now I'm kind of in a different position where we go as media, and we've been to the last 2 Super Bowls, last year in SoFi and this year in Arizona as part of the Irish NFL show. So I get to see both sides of it, and it's really enjoyable, but ultimately we all love the game. Look, let's get into the 49ers. I don't know, where do I start with this one? I'll start with the end of the season because you beat the Cowboys in the divisional round. I didn't think you played great in that game. I think he did enough to win the game. It was, the game was quite close, and maybe then the score reflected in the end. I know he could have pulled away and covered a handicap, shall we say, in that game. But it wasn't really until the 3rd quarter with that long drive in which McCaffrey finished off that I felt the game was going in the 49ers in direction. And then they go into the championship game, and it was always going to be a difficult game going into Philadelphia. But the wheels came off very quickly because of the situation with the quarterback. Brock Purdy gets injured. There really isn't a playbook that they could really work towards with Josh Johnson, and it fell away. And even leading up to halftime, they still found a way to be back in the game. McCaffrey scores the touchdown. I felt they were a little bit aggressive towards halftime, which led to a turnover. Maybe they should have just taken halftime. I'm bringing it all back, and I don't mean to, but
I'll pour it on. Don't hold back, Brian. We've been through this. It's okay.
It's such an unusual team in many ways because they lose the Super Bowl against the Chiefs when they have a 10-point lead with 7 minutes to go. They then have the championship game against the Rams, in which There was an opportunity to have an interception. Jimmy Garoppolo shows his interception. 49ers fans will reflect and say, should have won that game. This year, I don't think to say they should have won that game, but they'll reflect on the fact that injuries potentially caused them an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl. How frustrating is it on one hand, but yet great in a way that they're consistently thereabouts every year.
Yeah, it's so close. And the expectations for 49ers fans in this culture is championships. They've got 5 rings already. And so greatness is expected. However, if you take a little bit of a bird's eye approach just over this millennia, the 49ers they've either been incredible or they've been really, really bad, because you've got to several NFC championships under Harbaugh-led teams. You've gotten to 3 out of 4, 3 NFC championships the past 4 years under Shanahan. But the period in between, Tom Sula, Chip Kelly, just gross, where you're just a bottom dweller in the NFL. So it's feast or famine, but we haven't crossed the finish line in about 23 years now. So the 49ers are a little bit restless, because I think with a lot of fan bases, they'd be very, very content and happy with what has happened over the past 4 years for their team. 49ers fans are not. They're really, really not. And so it hurts, but man, back-to-back years knocking Dallas Cowboys out of the playoffs, that is a feat in and of itself, especially with the rivalry that goes back between those two teams. That's a beautiful thing. There's a lot to be celebrated, and I feel like in the culture, at least here in the States, is you win it all or you don't win anything. I constantly go back to my childhood, and I'm just like, well, hold on just a second. There is so much to celebrate with what has happened here. But man, it would be nice to add 1 ring. And they're just so close. And I think they're going to be close for a long time. You just got to have a little bit of luck and a couple things go your way. The Niners will be in the mix for a long time, though. So even though it's a little frustrating right now with the Chiefs loss, and then, the Rams lost last year, and then this year, the Eagles injuries and all that stuff. But the Niners aren't going anywhere, Brian. And I'm pretty excited if they could just do that just a little bit extra to get that last ring. You could get that next ring.
No, I agree. I certainly think they're a team that would be thereabouts and challenging to be back in the championship game next year against the Eagles. I just want to touch on a couple of things, because you ask NFL fans, whether it's, as you said, across the world, or whether in Europe, or whether in the States, and it's the win-it-all mentality. And the Rams, for example, they kind of go all in, and the Bucs, to a certain extent, go all in. And we see the Bucs now potentially transitioning to a difficult period now again. And the Rams are certainly in a difficult situation. And then you ask fans, would you rather have a team that's in the playoffs every year, nearly making the Super Bowl, or would you rather be in a situation where you win it all and then you have to suffer for 3 or 4 years? And by and large, most fans said, I'd rather win it all and suffer and take my bumps and bruises that come with it. Like, it's a balancing act. Where do you sit with that? Like, you've touched on a very good point there. Upon reflection, 49ers fans should be really pleased at how the franchise has been run, but yet some people will say we still haven't got to the promised land.
It's easy as a Rams fan looking back, like, oh, we did it. It was worth it. We're great. But my problem with that is they had to have so many lucky breaks. It's not like they went through and dominated and it was like a guaranteed thing, whatever. Like you said, the dropped interception by Jaquiski Tart, that would have changed things. The phantom pass interference call in the Super Bowl late in the fourth quarter, like that changed everything. So like, it's not like it was a guarantee. All these trades and, salary cap manipulation was like, oh, we're getting our Super Bowl. They barely got it, but they got it. And so now they could sit there and be like, oh, this is awesome. We did what we wanted to do. For a team like the 49ers or any team in contention that does not have Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, none of those guarantees are there. So many things have to break your way in those close moments in the playoffs that you can't determine that. So for the 49ers, and John Lynch has said this multiple times, he doesn't think it's an either or argument, and that's not the way they're building the 49ers. They want to win it all now, but they do not want to sacrifice the chance for sustained success long term. And I think as long as Kyle Shanahan is here, I'm not sure John Lynch will be here as long as Kyle. He's got other offers and, going back in the broadcast booth and whatever else. Kyle's a coach. Kyle's going to be here for a while. And I do not believe that Kyle will be one of those guys, even if you look at the huge Trey Lance trade, which has not worked out yet, right? Like Rams traded everything for a 32-year-old, 33-year-old quarterback. 49ers traded everything for a 20-year-old quarterback. there's difference there. And so even in just the minutia of the transactions that are taking place for the Niners, it is long-term sustained success. That is what they're going after. And I like that personally as a fan, because I remember those Dennis Erickson days, Chip Kelly days. They were not fun. Those were bad times.
I recall when we were at the Super Bowl in SoFi and we were doing our live show at the stadium on the Saturday, and I said, it's win or go home essentially for the Rams, because like you said, they gave up so much to be in that position. If it didn't transport it, they won that game against the Bengals. Teams may have fallen off the cliff a lot quicker than which they have, and they have fallen off the cliff. This isn't the Rams podcast. Let's get away. Let's get away from the
I don't mind talking about their demise, though. I will just throw that out there, Brian. I'll relish in that as much as possible.
There's many a fan that would agree with you, but just I was going to ask you on Kyle Shanahan, because don't get me wrong, he's a fantastic coach, and there's many a team in the league that would love to have him. And then you get into conversations with fans, and you discuss his play calling and how effective he is and how he can run a really orchestrated offense. And it was reflective of last year that essentially he was able to plug and play Brock Purdy into an offense, and it worked up to the point in which he got into. And it may have worked if he had continued in that championship game. But yet there's still that kind of thing in the background again, which you kind of touch on, where they still haven't got over the promised line, and people still kind of always, unfortunately, refer back to the Falcons when he was the offensive coordinator and his play calling towards the end of that Super Bowl, when rather than running the ball and taking a field goal, he wanted to be aggressive and essentially try to kill the game off completely. And then with 7 minutes to go, thereabouts in the Super Bowl, he got away from what was working against the Chiefs, which was a really strong, robust run game. Whereas are the 49ers fans 100% behind him as a coach, or do you find when things don't go the way which you would like that there's a little bit of rumblings around how he play calls a game?
There is a little bit. When you lose those close games and those tough moments, it's natural. But again, the problem with fandom is you get locked in on just what you have and what you want. Okay. And this is usually where the Kyle Shanahan rumblings end, is if there is somebody that's like, man, we got to get a new coach, Shanahan's not doing it, then you call timeout briefly and you say, okay, who would you prefer over Kyle Shanahan? And that's where the crickets come in. You look at how many offensive coaches have been poached under Kyle Shanahan since he has shown up. It's almost a third of the NFL now is run by Kyle Shanahan coordinators and coaches, yet one thing remains the same. The 49ers have a top 5 offense year in, year out, regardless of the quarterback. We've been through so many. It doesn't matter. The offense works. So, I use this continuously. If you do not have Kyle Shanahan as a top 5 head coach, let alone play caller, then I think there's something wrong with the way you're measuring this. It's okay to be frustrated. Is Kyle Shanahan perfect? God, no, he's not even close. There's lots of issues that I think continually show their head. He's not aggressive on fourth downs, relies way too much on the pass game whenever the games are in tension late in the game, which is ironic because he has such a great run game. There's concerns, but at the end of the day, as long as Kyle Shanahan's here, I think this championship window is going to be open.
Quarterback situation, it's hard to, I suppose, put it all into words around it, because it's changed so much over the past couple of years. You had the Jimmy Garoppolo situation. Some people are in on him, some people aren't. Some people are kind of glad to see him move on. I know a few 49ers fans have felt he was given a bit of an unjust kind of, I suppose, within the media in terms of how he's deemed and seen as a quarterback and whether he can get to the promised land. And as you said earlier on in the podcast, you make that kind of aggressive move to move up the tree in the draft. And at that stage, a lot of people felt it was for Mac Jones. And then again, there's the narrative out there that it was Mac Jones, and then they got talked into Trey Lance. But obviously then Brock Purdy was something that nobody's seen, coming from the 7th round and coming in last year. Sam Darnold comes in this offseason. It's such a quandary to try figure out, because Trey Lance has been suggested as someone that they would consider moving. Do you buy into that? Or do you think that's one of those situations they're not actively looking to move, but if an offer came in that was really, substantial, they'd consider? I think that's gone now because we've moved on from the draft. But are you comfortable with Purdy as your quarterback next season, or would you still feel Trey Lance should be given that opportunity?
The one constant that I think would be almost impossible to deny is that the front office, coaching staff, locker room has bought into Brock Purdy. Like, that's the one thing that is a certainty. Like, Brock is awesome. There's no doubt about it. However, Brock has limitations. There's a reason why he went pick 262 in the 7th round. doesn't have a strong arm, smaller body, not the most mobile quarterback. He does have some short bursts and some move around the pocket, which is awesome. There's a reason also why the 49ers traded so much draft capital to go get Trey Lance, who's a huge, big body, strong arm quarterback, and mobile. There's reasons why those things happen. So the fact that you have Brock Purdy there, now the injury complicates everything. And I think if Brock Purdy was healthy, there is a strong possibility you could trade Trey Lance. The reason why I kept harping all offseason is like Trey Lance is not going to be moved at the draft. It's because you don't know how Brock's going to recover. The next checkup that he has is the first week of June. Still hasn't passed yet. We still have 3 more weeks till his first checkup to even start the throwing motion takes place. So the idea of moving off of Trey Lance for Brock Purdy, I don't mind that. And I think next year that could be a strong possibility. However, not knowing and having that huge question mark over Brock Purdy's health, that complicated everything. That's why I didn't think Trey Lance would be moved until there was a healthy Brock Purdy. So if somebody is in the diehard, like, man, we're going to trade Trey and just Brock's the guy for the future, I'm not against that. But that's something that would take place probably at the trading deadline during the season. Once you're 100% sure Brock is back. He's only 23 years old. So young quarterback, one of the cheapest rookie or the cheapest quarterback deal in the NFL, period. I'm excited for what is to come. But here's my big but, Brian. You do have this little window where you could possibly see what Trey Lance could be like. Trey Lance didn't get a start with CMC last year. Didn't get one. Trey Lance didn't get one start last year with George Kittle. He's going to be thrust into a situation that is the most quarterback-friendly offense, I think, in the NFL. I don't want to write this out soon because what would be better than just having Brock Purdy, having an electric Trey Lance and Brock Purdy both on rookie deals for the next 2 years? The 49ers are in a weird situation. I do not consider it a bad situation. For media, it's a little confusing, and that's where all these rumors come in. We haven't even mentioned Sam Darnold. But the Niners have options, and they're all relatively cheap quarterback options, which isn't a bad thing, especially with the amount of injuries we have at that position.
Yeah, because you could argue, if you're on the Trey Lance train, that nobody's really seen him really in the NFL properly, because the first game last season, with all due respect, was a monsoon in Chicago, and then he gets injured in the second game. He's gone for the season. We've seen very little of him, prior to that when Jimmy Garoppolo was involved. So you could argue he's still the guy that we thought he was. He's still the guy that we expect him to be, should he come back from the injury. I think where it really does confuse everybody, and genuinely, when I saw this deal coming in, to me, it strikes me as Sam Darnold will be the backup. They'll make a decision who they really believe is the right appropriate quarterback, whether it's Purdy or whether it's Lance. And whoever's the odd man, they won't be remaining in situ within the 49ers, because it doesn't make sense to have the Sam Darnold there on, and he's not on significant money, with all due respect. He's only there on a reasonable contract. So it's not a financial burden from the Caps, but it's more around having 3 quarterbacks in play. And you're right in what you're saying. If you have 2 quarterbacks there on a rookie contract, and they're both comfortable, whether one's a starter or the other, why is Sam Darnold there, and how does he fit into the model in which they're looking to do? Because he doesn't strike me as a quarterback that is Kyle Shanahan-esque type of quarterback.
You know, it's interesting because when free agency happened, the legal tampering that came out first, right? The first quarterback signing was Darnold to the Niners before Jimmy G, before Derek Carr. Like, it was the first on day one. Like, these two, Sam Darnold and the Niners, targeted each other. Like, Sam wanted to come here, Niners wanted him to come here, and they paid him as such. And I think, again, it's a twofold approach. One, having Sam Darnold and Trey Lance moving forward with the question mark on Brock Purdy is a beautiful thing. Like, you've got 2 young quarterbacks, supremely talented, both number 3 overall picks. People forget how young Sam Darnold is. He's 25 years old. Trey Lance's birthday was yesterday. He just turned 23. So if Brock Purdy doesn't come back, that's your plan, not a bad plan. Now this is where what you alluded to, Brian. Once Purdy is back, now you got 3. It did take 3 quarterbacks, Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Brock Purdy, to get them where they got last year. They're all cheap deals. So, like, you could totally just mitigate the salary cap and just keep those guys. But I do believe once Brock Purdy comes back healthy, if Trey Lance and Sam Darnold are still healthy at that time, which is a big if, I do think one of those quarterbacks would be moved, not named Brock Purdy. Trey has a chance to shine. I think he's going to get the first chance. I think he's going to get most of the first team reps. I fully expect that Trey Lance will be starting week 1 for the 49ers this year. That's my expectation. He's got to win that job in camp, but they were so confident in him last year heading into camp. They had Jimmy Garoppolo on a separate field. They wouldn't even let him buy the team. What has changed from then to now? Like you said, he played 5 quarters last year, 4 of which were in a monsoon. I was in. My phone didn't work for 5 days after that Chicago mess. And then he broke his ankle against the Seahawks week 2. So what has changed from we're fully confident with Trey Lance last year, week 1, to we got to get this guy out of here? I don't buy it. I just don't see it.
Free agency, you touched on it there. I mean, Sam Darnold being the very first quarterback to go off in free agency, but one of the very first marquee players to come off the board, Javon Hargrave, effectively going from your biggest rival, with regard to getting to the Super Bowl in the Eagles. So I was surprised that it was the deal that was done, because I didn't think they would be that aggressive defensively, because everybody knows and recognizes that the 49ers is such a sound and strong defense. And I recognize some players left within the secondary and stuff. Were you taken back by the enormity of the fact that he essentially said, right, he's pinpointing a player that's done so much damage to them in the championship game, take him away from your biggest rival and put him on our team to only make our defense stronger? To me, that strikes me again as a situation where we'll have a comfortable offense with a quarterback, whether it's Trey Lance or whether it's Brock Purdy. We won't be expansive in offense. We'll allow our defense to be the ones essentially wins us by and large most of the games next season and bring in an even stronger talent. Were you surprised at the aggressive move that they made in bringing him in?
Man, nobody saw this coming. Like it was not even on the radar. I remember it because I was expecting Jimmy G to get signed, like that taking place real early. Mike McGlinchey. There were a lot of big names for the 49ers that were in flux. Javon Hargrave tweets out an eyes emoji. That's it. And I remember just thinking like, he's leaving the Eagles. That's great news. Wonder where he's going. Not even on the radar. Like he was top of the line. He got $21 million per year deal. I had no clue. And, back to this, I hate to bring it back to the quarterback's position, but you have all these quote unquote insiders, NFL media guys that are constantly saying what's going to happen at the quarterback position. Not one person predicted Javon Hargrave to the 49ers. Nobody knew about it. Like I cover the 49ers for a living full time. I had no clue. To get that signing was crazy. And like you said, stealing them from the Eagles, that's huge as well. Making a strength to strength. The 49ers have constantly put so much draft capital and actual salary cap capital towards the defensive line. And I think that's just going to continue to be the case. I'm excited, man. Imagine Nick Bosa finally getting more help up front. Javon Hargrave led the Eagles, as great as their defensive line is, in double teams last year. You're going to pull some of those away from Nick Bosa? Crazy to think that the 49ers, who had the number 1 scoring defense, number 1 yardage allowed defense, could be better this year. That's pretty scary. I know all the focus goes on the quarterbacks, but people keep losing sight. This was the best defense in the year last year, and they just got better. It's going to be fun to watch.
The rich only get richer defensively.
I love it.
Wilkes comes over as defensive coordinator, and I wonder how that's going to transition in, because you are right. You're talking about how teams are going to manage the defense and the difficulty of not only Hargrave but Bosa and all that comes with that. And other players, in fairness, it's not just about those 2 guys. But do we see a plug and play essentially? Wilkes comes in and transitions into the same same defense as there today, or do you expect things to move around and we see a different kind of makeup of the defense next season?
This was interesting because they had an opportunity to bring back the great Vic Fangio to be the 49ers defensive coordinator. Rumors come out he accepted the Dolphins job, never signed pen to paper, flies out to San Francisco, Santa Clara, meets with Shanahan, Lynch, all those guys. And then what happens next is it gets leaked from the 49ers. They have like a press conference, and they basically say the number 1 importance is continuity with what we've had in the past. Vic Fangio, strong 3-4 guy, with D'Amico Ryans, Robert Saleh, 4-3 guy. That gets put out in an interview. Then literally maybe a couple hours later, Fangio signs with the Dolphins, and then Wilkes gets brought in. And so the Niners had their choice, and they chose, we want the system continuity over pretty much a future Hall of Famer defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio. We went with that. And so the 49ers, it's going to be the same. The only difference that I would add is a little bit more defensive back focus kind of took place. And even in looking in the draft, right? They trade up for a safety, Jair Brown. That's their first pick. Their first pick in the 5th round, Darrell Luter Jr., long-armed, corner, fast. They went after these guys that I think fit what they want to do. So for the first time, we're going to have a defensive back-centered defensive coordinator. Both Saleh and D'Amico Ryans were linebacker guys. So imagine if continuity's there, you get Javon Hargrave up front, you keep the same system so there's no leaning curve, but now you're getting somebody that has coached some of the greats like Sean Taylor, some of the best back-end safety players in NFL modern history. Talanoa Hufanga is a name to watch. He was an All-Pro last year in his first year starting, but I really thought that the Steve Wilks hiring will benefit Talanoa Hufanga more than any other player on this team.
You've touched on the draft there, so maybe we'll just jump into the draft selections. Obviously, they're not selecting until the 3rd round, and one of the 3rd picks goes on a kicker. And I watched the press conference in which John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. I got the impression Shanahan was like saying, "I've accepted it. It was the right thing to do, but I'm not necessarily comfortable with it because he probably felt there was another player, another position that they could have went after." But overall, see, it's very difficult when a team is selecting in the 3rd round because by the 3rd round, you're normally effectively taking players to fit into the roster as opposed to the 4th round where you might take best player available even in the 2nd round. Overall, from the draft perspective, is there any player that you've called out a few there, but is there anyone that you're really looking forward to seeing at the lower level, the 5th round, 6th round, that you believe that could come in and surprise people and make a bit of an impact?
Yeah, I think there's 2 guys that really stand out. When we talked about Javon Hargrave, the big reason why I didn't see that taking place, I thought if they spent money, it was going to be at the edge, defensive end position, not defensive tackle. I was wrong there. They drafted Robert Bill Jr. in the 5th round out of Georgia. He's one of the 4.4 speed, fast edge guy. And one of the things the Niners have kind of missed all the way back from D Ford in 2019 is that speed edge rusher. He fits that mold to a T. So he's going to be able to come in and just be a situational pass rusher, which again, Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, Nick Bosa, he just gets to come off the edge on certain plays. I think that's one that stands out big time. And then I'll go 7th rounder, tight end Braden Willis out of Oklahoma. He was one of 2 gold helmet players. This is a marcation that the 49ers give about 15 players in the draft that just excel at so many different categories and they have no question marks, perfect fit type guy. He was the 2nd tight end taken by the 49ers, but I think he's going to have a bigger impact than Cameron Latu, who they drafted in the 3rd round this immediate year. So I think Braden Willis earlier, Cameron Latu they drafted as a project player that eventually will step into that role. But those are 2 guys I want to watch for. Robert Bill Jr., the edge out of Georgia, and Braden Willis, the tight end / fullback out of Oklahoma. Those 2 guys I'm pretty excited to see.
John, I feel like you talk NFL and 49ers with you all even.
I love it.
My final question for this recording is it's around your expectations. And I know we've touched on it there that a lot of 49ers fans expect them to be thereabouts again. It's more around the division, right? Because we touched on the Rams. The Rams are going through a difficult period, and similar enough to the Cardinals. They've got their 2 4th-round picks next year. It has a feel that they're already kind of looking 12 months ahead. But the Seahawks have rebounded very quickly in terms of people at this time last year were writing them off. Russell Wilson had just been traded. And now Seattle fans have kind of recognized it wasn't necessarily Pete Carroll that was holding Russell Wilson back. That was always kind of the narrative. It's actually quite the opposite. They recognized that Pete Carroll and John Snyder knew what they were doing when they traded Russell Wilson away. They've done well in the draft with Witherspoon and Smith and Nigba coming in at wide receiver who can complement Metcalf and Lockett. Do you see them? Or is it a false dawn, or do you really believe they can be back there? Because they seem to want to build a really strong defense, recognizing that they really need to be up there with the 49ers next season.
It's the 49ers have struggled with the Seahawks majorly. No doubt about that over the last decade. I mean, it's been a one-sided, and it's been frustrating. Last year was interesting because the Seahawks didn't take a step back. They lost their quarterback. And it turns out the 49ers didn't have a Seahawks problem. The 49ers had a Russell Wilson problem. Even last year with Russell Wilson being terrible, the Denver Broncos still beat us. Like, we still lost them. Having said that, we swept not only the Seahawks in the regular season 2-0, we also knocked them out of the playoffs. So you went 3-0 against the Seattle Seahawks team. And I think a lot of that has to do with the teams that were able to beat the 49ers, or at least have a lot of success against them defensively. You got to throw the ball deep. That's not Geno's thing. When you build your team, you have to build your team to win within the division. And the Seahawks have 100% closed the gap. However, I still do not believe that this is a team that is built to beat the way the 49ers play offense and defense. Talent-wise, incredible. They've done so well in the draft back-to-back years. I think they're going to be a better team. However, I just don't see the matchups versus, the Seattle Seahawks offense versus the Niners defense. It's pretty difficult to find the matchups where it's going to benefit them. Their offensive line's still not great. Their defensive line's still not great. They got some guys in the second, third rounds that I do really like. Derek Hall is one of my favorite players out of Auburn, edge rusher they got in the second round. But we're going to have to see. Something's going to have to change with the Seattle Seahawks if they want to supplant the 49ers. Because, again, the quarterbacks that have success against the Niners have to throw the ball deep, have to be mobile. That's really not Geno's game. His completion percentage is always off the charts, and I think they're going to beat a lot of really good football teams. I'm just not quite sure the way they win the division is by, splitting that series. That's probably best case for Seattle Seahawks, which is 100% possible. But they're going to have to beat some of the other better teams if they want to win this division. I just don't find them matching up well with what the Niners have built.
I think the 49ers will be aspiring to be the number one seed, get that championship game played in Santa Clara as opposed to going on the road, and maybe things will turn out very different. They've been on the road the past 2 years. I think ultimately get the game in Santa Clara and see what transpires from there. John Chapman from the 49ers Rush podcast. It's been a pleasure having you on. I've really enjoyed it. I feel like I could talk 49ers for the whole night. But no, we really appreciate you coming on. Thanks again.
Thank you, Brian. This is incredible, man.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Irish NFL show with me, Colm Cronin. And today I am thrilled to be joined by someone who will be familiar to people on this side of the Atlantic. There is a sizable Giants fan contingent, I can tell you. It is Madelyn Burke, who covers the Giants, does the post game, also has a morning show on Amazon Prime Video. Very welcome to the Irish NFL show.
Thank you so much for having me, Colm. It's a pleasure.
I have to ask, given the surname, do you have Irish heritage? Have you ever been to this little green island?
I have never been to Ireland, but it is on my list because I absolutely have Irish heritage. My dad's name is Jimmy Burke, which is a very Irish name as well. And the Burkes and the Earleys, lots of Irish heritage in the family. I just haven't yet made the pilgrimage back.
Well, hopefully at some point in the not too distant future. And if I can take you back, I suppose, in terms of because you are journalist, broadcaster, storyteller. Was that something you were always interested in? Was that curiosity around people, or what led you into what you're doing now?
Curiosity, I think, is a good way of putting it. Absolutely. But I loved to write when I was younger. I always loved writing. And when I was looking at what my preferred vocation would be, that was what really drew me in. And so that kind of created this path towards journalism. But as things often do, it took many turns of its own and ended up in the form of it that I'm in now. But I was, I did high school newspaper, and I wanted to go to college. I went to Arizona State, and they have a pretty good journalism school out there. And I thought this will be a great opportunity for me to write. And when I was in my sophomore year of college, ESPN Monday Night Football came out to Arizona, and they were putting on this big Monday Night Football event. They were hiring people from the journalism school to come and say, hey, do you want to come carry the cable, essentially? You watch a game and you see the guy running down the sideline with the camera and then someone behind him making sure nobody trips over the cable. So myself and about, thousands of other journalism students were like, I would love to do that. Let me carry the cables. So I didn't get the job. Did not get the job, but I sent a thank you note after the rejection note saying, hey, thank you for considering the journalism school. If there's ever another opportunity, I would love to, get my foot in the door. And the next day I got a call from a man named Joel Edwards who said, listen, I've never been thanked for rejecting someone before. You were on the short list anyways, but it was a numbers game. But instead, why don't you come and work in the production office with us, help get talent to and from the set, kind of do a little bit of the logistical production coordination of Monday Night Football with us as a PA and a runner. I was like, absolutely. So I did that. It was an iconic game, Bears-Cardinals. The Bears won without any offensive touchdowns. Denny Green had a meltdown at the podium afterwards. You want to crown him, crown him. We let him off the hook. And I thought, this is what I need to do. I want to be around this all the time. And now here I am.
I love the fact that, talk about serendipity, all based off of sending that note. And, you talked, I suppose, in relation to how you got into it, but you've had it, and you mentioned it in the opening. It has been a journey which has had a couple of different spots. You've covered the college game. I know you did a little bit around kind of basketball. I mean, you have an interest in all sports, but I suppose in terms of maybe the college side of things before you came to New York, well, we don't get to see that much college ball over here. It is something where in August we will welcome Notre Dame. They're going to take on Navy. So we get the week 0 game. But generally during the year, I suppose we don't get to see it. So we get to see those athletes when they come into the NFL. Yeah. For you, like covering the college game in particular, I'm wondering how does it differ from covering the NFL?
There's so many more people. There are so many more people at the college level. And that's one thing, but also the sport. Oftentimes, especially around the draft, we look at the college to pro comparisons. And I think it gets lost how different the sport of football is from college to the NFL. I mean, starting with the very basic element, the actual ball they use is a different ball. So, I mean, it's a similar shape, similar size, but it's a different ball. The hash marks on the field, the marks in the middle of they're wider. So it's different geometry. The routes are different. There's so much that is just slightly different from the college level to the pro level, plus the schemes, the scoring. I mean, college football, you'll have scores in the 40s and the 50s on a regular basis, and that's nothing to scoff at. Whereas the NFL, a 21-7 game seems like, all right, that was a good one, right? It's just a very different ball game and a different schematically, but it's much like, it's not necessarily a minor league, but it is a league for a lot of athletes to show what they can do and get into the NFL. And there are a lot of talented talented college football players that just don't translate in the NFL because their skill set is more suited for the college game. And vice versa. There's some kind of middling college players that'll turn out to be Hall of Famers in the NFL because their skill set is more suited. So there's just these slight and subtle differences in the game, but it makes for a good change.
And in terms then of the work with the Giants, how did that opportunity come about?
Oh my gosh. Well, I had moved to New York for another job, actually. I moved out here in 2015 when sports betting was all the rage, and FanDuel at the time, they were looking for someone to do, daily fantasy content about NFL and NBA, which are my two strong suits. I mean, you mentioned I worked in the NBA, I worked for the Clippers for 5 years. I did, a myriad of other things. So I took that job, moved out here for that, and, did a lot of football, basketball, NBA, Sirius radio show and whatnot. But this was also in the early days of sports betting in America. And a lot of people were raising eyebrows like, is this legal? Is this gambling? Can we do this? And one of those people was then the Attorney General of New York, who later was like, listen, this might not be legal, so we're going to have to shut it down. And so I had moved from Los Angeles to New York, across the country, uprooted my life. And suddenly it's like, thanks for coming. You don't have work. And so it really is one of those, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere cities. And I just started putting things together and working at various different outlets. And I found my way through an introduction through a dear friend and a woman who represented me at the time, Babette Perry, introduced me to my now boss of the Giants and said, hey, he's looking for someone to do some programming with them, and got in the door there in 2016, and the rest is history. And I've been kind of building with them ever since. And it's been great. I mean, that organization is such a treat to be a part of. It really does feel like such a family. And there are so many people who have been there for so long and have seen so many iterations of the Giants. You walk in the front door and you've got the 4 Lombardis on the left in the glass case, and there's so much history and pride in what it takes to be part of the Giants organization. So it's been cool, and watching them evolve over the years. There have been some rough years in my tenure there, that's for sure. But last year was a really good one, and I think they're building something really special with Joe Shane as the GM and Brian Dable as the head coach, and the entire staff that they've got in place. So I'm feeling very lucky to be a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, what an incredibly storied franchise, and obviously they have the Irish connection. And my co-host on the Irish NFL show, Brian, is a massive Giants fan, and it would be remiss of me, and I know he wouldn't forgive me, because during your time there, Eli Manning was obviously there, and what was Eli like off the field? We obviously got to see Eli on the field, and so many memorable moments throughout his career. We get to see him now, with his brother, on the Manning cast. But when you were kind of working with Eli, what was he like?
Eli is Eli. I think what people are now experiencing of Eli Manning, whether it be on the Manning cast or the Eli Manning show or many of his other verticals, is actually who he is and always has been. But he was a lot more guarded, or maybe not necessarily guarded, but deliberate with what he showed to people while he was playing quarterback for the Giants. Because, I mean, the New York market is a tough one, and he wanted to make sure that he didn't give anyone any opportunity to, perceive him in any other way than a consummate professional, which he absolutely was. He's also very well known for his practical jokes. And, in the days of before the iPhone and Face ID, he'd go into guys' phones and switch the language to Russian, or, misplace their dry cleaning and things like that. He's just a total practical joker, and a treat to be around, and just a gem of a human. And I'm just grateful that now that he's retired from the game, that he's showing that side of him, because he's such a witty and charismatic and funny guy that, and always has been.
Yeah, no, but I guess we didn't get to see it for so long, especially when you're removed from it, because what we saw, if you weren't within it, probably Giants fans probably knew it because they got to see it a little bit more. Maybe I'm just thinking, certainly as a Broncos fan, my memory is Peyton's winning the Super Bowl, the camera cuts obviously to the family, Archie's, everyone's enjoying life, and Eli's kind of stony faced, and that's how he had this kind of caricature. Yeah. And now he's nothing like that. And how common is that, Madelyn, that what we see of players like during their career is not really who they are, and it's only outside of the sport that they kind of really come to life?
I think it's just kind of a human nature thing, right? Especially being in the public eye. I mean, you've got this podcast, and I'm sure all the listeners and the viewers feel like they know you through it, but they know a part of you. They know what you let them see, right? And I think a lot of these athletes are a lot more mindful and deliberate of, okay, let me make sure that this part of me that I feel comfortable letting everyone see right now, especially as it pertains, because how things can go, right? When things are going well and you're winning, and as Sean O'Hara calls it, vitamin W, if winning is happening, everything is great. But if teams start losing and a quarterback is playing a practical joke on somebody, then suddenly that's going to be frowned upon, and this and that, and it will just be made so much bigger than it needs to be. So I think it's more of a deliberate way of saying, okay, you know what, here's the part of me that I'm willing to share with you right now. But now that the game's behind me and a lot of these guys are in their retirement, it's like, all right, this is who I really am and always have been. And like you mentioned, the resting Eli face, it's so, it's become such a moniker and a precious little but it really is. It's just.
And I suppose outside of Eli, I'm wondering, are there kind of particular moments that stick out to you from your time covering the Giants? I mean, we've had the good fortune of having one of your colleagues, Brandon Love, on the show a couple of times. And when the Giants were in London, he came on our live show from the stadium. So he was sharing some of the stories. But I'm wondering for you, are there things that stick out from the years?
Oh gosh, there's so many. And Brandon Lennon and I came into this role together. He is like my work brother, and I adore that man so much. He and I have done so many different shows and iterations of these shows throughout the years. There have been so many things. I mean, when I think back, obviously Odell was a lightning bolt and such a joy to work with, and a big spark plug in that locker room. And he was such a consummate professional that he wants to win so badly, and being around that energy and the way that he inspired a lot of the younger guys coming in, I thought was really cool. Seeing this team this most recent year going through, I mean, all the adversity they've been through for the prior 5 years, and then coming in, new coaching staff, kind of righting the ship and starting off this season, a couple wins in a row, and everyone's kind of raising eyebrows like, okay, this is fun. It's nice to get some wins, but it feels kind of like we stole a couple. It took a little while for the organization, even the players that had been around for some years, to really kind of feel at ease of, okay, this is happening. We can actually expect to win some of these games again. And watching this team build towards a postseason berth and having that energy and that excitement around the organization again for really the first time since 2016, when they went and they lost the first round of the Packers at Lambeau. It's just a whole different energy. And then now this time of year, you've got the schedule release coming out tomorrow. A couple games are trickling out. The Giants are going to be playing the Eagles on Christmas Day, which will be a big matchup. There's going to be a lot of, marquee attention once again on this franchise, which it is well deserved because they've got a lot of talent and they're building in the right direction. But gosh, there have been so many moments I can't even pinpoint. Yeah.
And I suppose that the change last year, the change in energy. I mean, we had the good fortune of talking to Joe Shane last summer. I think it was around about July, and already at that point, you could sense the confidence and the belief in himself, his belief in Brian Daboll, and that they were building something. Now, he didn't make any grandiose pronouncements. That's not his way. But you could sense like he was all business. And we saw that kind of throughout the season, the way the Giants overcame the injuries time and time again. And we obviously saw Brian Daboll pick up Coach of the Year. You get to see them, up close and watch. We get to see that they obviously, at least publicly, they are very close, and that's what you want in your head coach and your GM. Is that what you see day to day in the building?
I do. I mean, the two of them work together for years in Buffalo. They have a lot of respect for one another. Joe Shane is has been kind of the man in waiting in Buffalo for years and has been very hands-on in the GM process. So when he got this role with the Giants, he was ready. He was suited. And then Brian Daboll, who's been a coach and assistant coach in the NFL for 22 years and has won multiple Super Bowls, won a national championship with Alabama, has won at the highest level in various roles. And so having been around it for so long, it was like, yeah, of course he's ready for that head coaching role. And the one thing that I think stands out about Brian Daboll as a head coach that I've seen, and being around the Giants organization for the past several years and the turnover that they've had in coaching, being around, the NBA and seeing turnover in coaching, being around sports in general, one thing that I notice is a lot of times when a coach comes in and it's a first-time head coach getting their very first head coaching opportunity, many of these people will try to say, this is what a head coach does. This is how a head coach talks. This is what a head coach conducts himself as such, and will act in that manner rather than what I think that really sets Brian Daboll apart as this is Brian Daboll and this is Brian Daboll as a head coach, which is exactly the same person. And a lot of the players who have worked with him and been coached by him at previous organizations have kind of said a similar sentiment, that he is so authentically himself. He's not trying to be, he's worked with Bill Belichick, he's worked with Nick Saban. He's not trying to be either of them. He's trying to be himself and bringing the lessons and the tactics that he's learned from these other coaches to that spot. But that authenticity really resonates with a lot of the players. And he's, a fun, personable guy who will pull you aside in the hallway and do a card trick, but he's also going to be a hard nose and will call you out if needed. And that balance demands, respect from the players, but also gives a lot of likability. And he's created a really strong culture so far, only a year into the role. So, I can definitely see a lot of success coming from this duel. And, and Joe Schoen talking about it too, when you're building a roster, oftentimes there's some disagreement between whether it's ownership or the front office and coaching. But Joe Schoen understands that cohesion needs to exist, because say he really likes a player and the coach doesn't. And he says, well, too bad, I'm going to draft this player anyway. Say it's a wide receiver, just hypothetical. If he drafts a wide receiver, he's like, I like this wide receiver. And the coach is like, I don't know, I prefer this other one. He drafts one he likes. Every day in practice, the wide receiver drops the ball. See, I told you should have gone with my guy. See, I told you that was the wrong choice. And so I think Joe Schoen understands those elements and those dynamics, and saying that they all have to be on the same page in building this, not here's the players that you should have and go make that work. And the collaborative effort from not just, Joe and Dabes, but also Wink Martindale and the defensive coordinator, and Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator, and the skill position coaches who are saying, this is what I need. These are the ingredients I need to really cook what I want to cook. And it's coming together.
No, it certainly seems to be. And I suppose, look, quarterbacks get a lot of the attention, but another group of guys who maybe are put themselves in the spotlight because of their characters are the guys on the defensive line, and be they edge rushers or be they defensive tackles. I'm thinking Von Miller, JJ Watt, Chris Jones, and the Giants have that now in Dexter Lawrence.
Yep.
And we got to see Dexter last year in London, and certainly one of the more engaging players at the podium. He kind of regaled us with tales of going out and getting fish and chips. And even though he got 2 large portions, he found them very small in comparison to New York-sized portions. He's a guy just signed a new contract. We know he can be a game wrecker. What's he like in the building, Madelyn?
Where to begin with Dexter Lawrence? Oh my gosh, that man is a ball of sunshine. He's got this big smile on his face all the time. He's got this little giggle that is so like the juxtaposition of this like large 320 something pound man and his little giggle that he like is getting away with is hilarious. But he's the type of guy that when he came into this league, he and his Clemson teammates were all very close. They all had this Power Rangers thing going on, and Dexter Lawrence is very proudly the pink Power Ranger, the pterodactyl of the group. But that nickname has kind of paled in comparison to the one that he's really leaning on, which is Sexy Dexy. And he will call himself Sexy Dexy. He's got his Twitter handle is Sexy Dexy. I've tried very hard to like be one of the people at the forefront of like, let me help make this happen. But I cannot with a straight face just say, oh, Sexy Dexy, because people are like, I'm sorry, what? But it's so great. And he's got his little sack dance with it's hard to do. I don't know. He's such a treat. And he and Leonard Williams have this great buddy friendship, which has been really phenomenal, not just for the chemistry on the field, but just the two of them and what they've built in the interior of that line. And then, getting guys like Kayvon Thibodeau, another big personality to add to that defensive line and really shoring that up. But Dexter Lawrence got his big contract, as he mentioned, got a contract extension. So he's going to be with the Giants for the foreseeable future. He's got a New York Giants tattoo, like the NY logo right here on his bicep that he got on his rookie year. And I remember saying to him, like, all right, that's certain that this is it, right? He's like, I hope so. And so I'm really happy to see the organization commit to him, because especially under Wink Martindale's defense, Dex has just shined incredibly. They've really found a way to, because he's huge, but he's fast, he's athletic. And, we saw, I remember he chased down Baker Mayfield last year, and people are saying, how did that man get there faster than he did? He's a really special player, but a really special person as well, and just such a light and a positive presence to be around.
Now, you mentioned, I suppose, the schedule release and the fact, obviously, that the Giants will take on the Eagles in a huge divisional matchup on Christmas Day, and hopefully a more competitive game than my Broncos had against the Rams last year on Christmas Day. But all the fixture, I think, that an awful lot of people obviously want to see is the Giants Jets, because Aaron Rodgers has arrived in the New York market, and you referenced it earlier on. What has that been like? Because he's there a few weeks now.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because right now is obviously some downtime, but, he was out on the field practicing with the Jets. The Jets social media team was putting up some clips of that. And just seeing Aaron Rodgers practicing football in May is something we have not seen for years, Colin. And that is just a testament to how invested Aaron is in just making this happen and making this next chapter of his career work, which is, it's interesting. We've seen this story before of a Hall of Fame Packers quarterback, Brett Favre, taking his talents to the New York Jets and it not necessarily working out. But that Jets roster is in such a better position, and they were a quarterback away. Getting Aaron Rodgers is going to be great. He's been out on the town. He was, at a Knicks game recently because the Knicks are in the playoffs. The Rangers were recently in the playoffs. They got knocked out. Really embracing this New York life, and it's a good time to do it now that the schedule is, or the records are all 0-0 and nobody's losing just yet, and things are going well. And it'll be interesting to see how things go when the season starts. You mentioned, Giants Jets are going to have a regular season matchup this year. And I would anticipate with both of these teams having, playoff hopes and playoff implications that it would probably come later on in the season. Although some of my colleagues are hoping for an early, week one, but I don't know. We usually see Giants Jets in the preseason. This year, regular season matchup, I would imagine it being more in the mid to late part of the season when things are really heating up around the playoff race.
Yeah, certainly be very interesting to see that and how, again, things go in Brian Dable's second season. Madelyn, I really appreciate the time you've given. And I know, obviously, I mentioned the Giants fan base that is over here. But if there are people who, want to hear more of your work, where can they go about doing that?
Absolutely. Well, Giants.com, our Giants post-game show will also be streaming on Giants.com and on YouTube, and we've got a lot of shows, and then we'll have some training camp shows coming your way as well when that gets going in late July. But in the interim, I also host a morning show on Amazon on Prime Video called Bonjour Sports Talk, and we talk about everything from football to NBA to Aussie rules football and cricket and whatnot. And just social media, the World Wide Web column. It's all over the place. So, you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram. It's just my name, Madelyn Burke.
I'll make sure to put those in the liner notes. And also, in terms of your morning show, we got some great sports here in Ireland, Gaelic football and hurling. I think you should definitely consider covering those. It's a great time of the year as well, May, June, to come on over. So open invitation to visit this little green island.
I love it. I'll have to let you know when I get over there and check out some curling matches as well.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Colin.